following program is brought to you by the Ed Snyder Center for Enterprise and Markets at University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business. Welcome to the Ink Tank. Stay with us to get the inside scoop about technologies that could disrupt and challenge the way you do business.
Hello, I'm Christina Elson, and on this edition of the Ink Tank, we'll discuss the impact of fast-moving technology on the workforce. What can firms and individuals do to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution? What is the role of academia and government? My guest today is Brian Green, a Senior Vice President at Learning Tree International. Brian works across industries to support lifelong learning goals. Brian, good morning. Thanks so much for joining me today in the Ink Tank. I was thinking last night in preparation for our conversation about the industrial revolutions.
Yes.
Now we were going to talk today about the fourth industrial revolution, what that means for us. But this analogy popped into my mind of a train.
Yes.
So I was thinking okay, well, the first industrial revolution, there was the train and people were like, oh my God, what is this iron beast, right? And then the second industrial revolution, do you remember those videos of people watching the train come at them on the screen?
Of
and
course.
they started to scream and they're like, oh my God, what is that? And then, and then here we are. And so I was thinking that's a perfect analogy for the fourth industrial revolution because it's coming at us,
yeah.
right? The train is still coming.
Right.
And a lot of people are just like, oh my God, what does this mean? So we're going to talk about that today.
I love it.
And let's just jump right into that. So what is the fourth industrial revolution and what are we expecting about this?
Yeah. So first of all, good morning, and thank you very much for bringing me here. I've had the opportunity of listening in and even watching a lot of the Ink Tank interviews, and not only are you doing a good job, but your guests are doing an incredible job, and hopefully I can meet that bar. So thank you for having me. Really enjoying it. So the fourth industrial revolution, as you suggested, the first one was all about steam mechanics, and the second one we introduced electricity. Third one, we really introduced computer power. And now it's really this fourth industrial revolution, which a lot of you and your guests are speaking of, is how do we now amplify and accelerate the power of these network devices? And in many cases, moving these devices into the cloud and on mobile devices where we almost always are connected, even in our homes now as well, right? So that fourth industrial revolution is now looking at this broader connected network of devices, humans, data, and in many cases, that data is able to tell us different things that we didn't know. It's allowing the workforce to be a little bit wiser and smarter about the work that they do. And it's also really, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later in the program, is really changing the dynamics of how the human capital workforce needs to engage in the business. So we're moving from perhaps away from more of the low-skilled outputs to higher output because a lot of these machines and data are doing the work for us.
Yeah, so we want to jump into that definitely deeper because we want to focus on the impact that it's going to have on the workforce and what does that mean for continuous preparation. So preparing in our basic education, higher education, but then what that means for us throughout our careers. And so we really want to get your expertise and your thought leadership in that area. And a point that you just mentioned, which is so important, is this idea of, technology is allowing us to not have to do some of the more mechanized tasks. We're going to talk about the kind of skills that humans are going to keep doing for a long time and some of the things we may not.
Sure.
But one of the things it is allowing for is to think creatively about how to use this kind of technology. And, what are your thoughts in that direction about the need for human creativity and the application of technology?
Yeah, so in our space, thought leaders, if you will, in workforce development, we've always had the ability of utilizing technology to advance any of the work that we're doing, right? And you and I talked earlier off camera, if you will, on a new report that came out from the World Economic Forum on the impact that technology is having. And I would say that broadly, it's saying or suggesting that there's a small percentage of the population that will be completely eliminated because of technology, right? 3-4%, but that's today's technology. But if you look back over the last 20, 30, 40 years, if you will, technology's always impacted us directly, right? The use of computers allows us to be a lot more efficient and productive. But to your point, though, as we look at the workplace and how individuals are performing on the job, in many cases, excuse me, I think leadership is expecting us to be able to work more curiously and more creatively in many cases in government, as we're here in Washington, D.C., is trying to improve citizen services, trying to improve the customer experience, the user experience. And many of those things fall short, if you will, if we apply technology first and go try to find a solution. So what most organizations that we're seeing both in the private and the public sector are asking their staff is to really develop strategic thinking, creative thinking, really trying to harness curiosity to get them to start recognizing what are the problems that we're trying to solve first, and then let's figure out how technology can enhance that or apply that. Right?
Yeah. So that's so important because it really is about solving problems, identifying really challenging, problems, and thinking about how to solve those,
That's right.
and not so much about getting away from this idea of just short-term incremental change. Like, we have some big problems out there in the world that, technology can help to make not only human progress, contribute to human progress, but really enhance the quality of life, for us. And so that kind of focus on being able to apply technology there. But what is actually the business case for thinking about how to get workforce readiness for the technologies that are coming our way?
That's right.
How should leaders think about that?
So there's two different frames of mind here, if you will. So on the government side, the ecosystem of the government somewhat stymies, if you will, a little bit of that creativity. But I think the president's new management agenda is beginning to recognize low trust in government and really trying to bring value back to the federal employee, and we all celebrate that. It's unbelievable the expertise that exists in our federal agencies, whether it's civilian or DoD, and so I think in many times it really is leadership, really enforcing the idea that our employees are hired to deliver value and put them in a position to deliver value. And so on the private sector side, I would say, financial services organizations and technology and manufacturing organizations, those organizations are inherently inundated by the stress and risk of losing customer satisfaction, customer confidence, customer satisfaction, in principle, because they can go somewhere else, right? If they don't like product A from company A, they can go to product B and company B, and most likely it's going to be a similar experience. In the government, you really can't do that, right? There is a bit of a monopoly effect, if you will. And so I think the federal agencies have been a little bit slower to adopt some of this mentality, but it's really impressive to see pockets where it does exist, and they're doing exceptional work. HHS doing exceptional work, Veterans Affairs doing exceptional work. So I think the tide has definitely turned in recognizing the value that individual has in really identifying ways in which that we can improve the customer experience, and then identifying through their colleagues in IT and other organizations where, in fact, we can apply now technology once we've identified a path for improving the user experience or customer experience, a veteran trying to get benefits much more efficiently, right? Or someone at Social Security looking to get their benefits much more efficiently. So I think in many cases, the awareness of the employee's role for identifying opportunities of increasing user or customer experience is here today.
Yeah. So that's really important, obviously, the first step. And then we have to think about how we make sure that the employee is skilled
Correct.
to be able to deliver
That's right.
that, strategic, think about delivering the strategy. So what is the thought about that? How do we keep the workforce? Technology is moving so fast, and we don't always know what is things are going to look like 5 years from now.
That's
So
right.
how do we think about keeping the employees skilled ready? Yeah.
So I would say that there's a moniker, if you will, that a lot of organizations are beginning to adopt. Harvard did a great study on it recently. It's called VUCA.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phrase that the Army, U.S. Army, first originally came up with, and I think it's being pressed out even more now across organizations because of the recognition that technology is creating VUCA. And what VUCA is a description of an environment, and that VUCA environment is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ambiguous. And so if you look at this fourth industrial revolution, getting back to where we started, and looking at the amount of data that we're collecting and the volatility of the user right now being able to essentially pick a service or a platform that they want rapidly and in real time, and that uncertainty of technology and where technology is going. And so I think in most cases, this adoption of Agile is really a result of this, right? And so what Agile is really teaching the workplace and the global organizational workplace as well, not just here domestically, but it's really saying, let's not boil the ocean because technology is changing so quickly and so rapidly. What's more valuable to us is to deliver incremental value to our customer. And one, so that we can make progress, right? And if that progress is good, great, let's take round 2, round 3, round 4. But in many cases, in round 4, round 5, new technology might come in and say, allow us to pivot this way, but still showing value to the consumer experience or the user experience. And I think Agile plus the changing roles in technology, giving employees a lot more confidence to deliver without having to have the whole pie baked first. And that's critical.
Yeah, so as an employee, if I am, thinking about how to manage my career over the next, I see that there's a lot of new technological adoption. People are looking at different roles. I don't even know if my role is going to, be around in the next 10 years. We'll see what everybody else is doing.
We're going to be 2 robots here in about 3 years. It's going to be Alexa speaking to Alexa.
Alexa speaking to Alex and Alexa, right? Anyway, yeah. So so if you're an employee thinking about that, like, how do you get into this idea of I need to reskill, I need to upskill, I need to what do I need to do?
Right.
I want to be proactive about it, but there's just so much going on, right? How do I think about it? How do I sort through it? What should I be asking from my company or my?
Yeah, so all great questions, and I think what you just characterized is this classic umbrella called the war for talent, and the way in which that our social networks are now created and very transparent, I think first and foremost is that the accessibility of this war for talent and upskilling and reskilling and visibility on how technology is changing the landscape. I would say 20, 30 years ago, the employee base might have been sort of checked out on that stuff because it wasn't as transparent or at least accessible. I think now it is, right? And you've got platforms like LinkedIn and others that are clearly demonstrating workforce trends. And I think, HR organizations are not just looking at policy and legislative issues or, workplace issues. They're really looking at workforce development because so many organizations recognize with this dominant platform of fourth industrial revolution of technology that if we don't have the type of skills in our staff to keep up, right? Yeah. And as organizations that we're associated with, like ACT-IAC, we have conferences and everybody, the senior executives within government as well as private sector organizations are all saying, listen, technology modernization is great. But technology doesn't work by itself. We still need that human element. And if the human element isn't keeping up with the technology element, we're going to spend a lot of money without any functionality. And so I think the advice to employees is really professional advice, if you will, is to really get involved in the communities that you have a shared interest in, where you have a passion for. A lot of those fundamental things are still very relevant. People still look to identify, to have people within the organization that have passion, that have direction, that have a strategy, that have motivation. And so find those communities that are common to you and that share your values, and really begin to understand what are those skills that you're seeing that your colleagues are getting hired for, or check out the local training industry associations and identify what those skill trends are. And there's one that recently came out, the 2019 trends for IT professionals or whatever it might be. We're focused a lot on IT.
Sure.
It's not just about IT, but nonetheless, no matter what position that you're in or a profession that you're involved in, technology is being integrated in all of them across the board, whether you're in healthcare, financial services, even manufacturing. A colleague of mine said that the largest data sets in any industry is actually manufacturing, not financial services. So even in some of the first and second industrial revolution organizations are still being revolutionized with technology.
Yeah, certainly. And, referring again to this World Economic Forum report, which was, so enjoyable and for a couple reasons. One reason is that it highlighted the idea that many leaders are unsure about the future. And, of course, if you and I could predict the future, we'd be having this talk on a private island somewhere in the Pacific, right? Okay, so we're not doing that. But at the same time, you have to make bold choices,
That's right,
about what you're going to do.
Indeed.
And what you're going to invest in and how you're going to invest in reskilling. And one of the points in the report was that, most organizations are going to need to invest almost on a company-wide basis in reskilling, and that there is a business case to be made for reskilling. It's not just fire everybody and find some 22-year-olds, right? That's just not going to work, okay? So,
not that the 22-year-olds wouldn't mind that.
Right, exactly, yes. So you really do have to think about the long term, but you have to take risks. No one knows where it's all going. But another point that I found quite interesting is this idea that what you really want to invest in just is to go back to these points of creating the right culture, creating the right environment, creating the right attitude towards lifelong learning, which is something that you talk a lot about. And the curiosity aspect. So tell me a little bit about that, what you're seeing in terms of this balance between investing in reskilling and investing in creating the right environment to encourage that proactivity.
Sure. So let me take the first part first, which is on the environment for reskilling and some of that strategy, and we'll talk about the culture second, because many times culture can kill the strategy. So relative to the environment, so I've been in the training industry for 20 years plus or so. And my goodness, has it changed so much, right? In those 20 years, there used to be monopolies, and I've worked for a couple of them, where you could only get training from us, right, in the private sector. Educational institutions are, in many cases, monopolies as well. But then again, there's also choice within those monopolies, right? But for the most part, you didn't have the flexibility and access that you do today, which I love, actually. And so if you look for, unique professions and the vast availability to gain access to content now and experts, right, that are in your field, that are unique to you or unique to your little problem. If I can do a little bit of a tangent, back in the 90s, there was this great movie that I was a big fan of called The Matrix.
Sure.
It was Keanu Reeves and good guys fighting bad guys. But the unique thing about The Matrix was this little chip that each of them had in their head. And so whenever they needed something on the fly, like, for instance, you need a hot wire, a Black Hawk helicopter to get your kids to soccer practice faster.
Right.
You just download the chip and you hop in a Black Hawk helicopter and off you go.
Yeah.
And so while there's nobody flying around Black Hawk helicopters in D.C., but they are able to identify skills that are unique to that need right now before I go into my meeting or before I lead a project review or before we bring in these technology vendors, that I can get a quick dollop of knowledge really fast, or I can actually invest a half a day learning from leaders or hopping onto my platform and downloading a half-day session. And so in many cases, I think that the access to, excuse me, the access to learning that learners have now is incredible. And now this desire to have access has created this new cottage industry called EdTech, right? And EdTech is really vastly expanding the access and making it seamless to the users, like a Netflix, right? So you go on Netflix and you say, hey, I like this genre, I like that genre. So these EdTech platforms are now allowing that. And with AI, they're saying, hey, Brian, you tend to like, how to cook, English muffins. And so here's some French toast offerings for you as well. And so it's beginning to learn more and more on this types of skills that you need from the type of subject matter experts that you've been watching. And I just think the ease of access and the relevance of that's providing learners, good learners who are really investing in themselves, I think is an amazing opportunity for the workforce. Now, getting back to the culture side, I think that on the culture side, I think we are in a fairly major shift right now. You have a lot of employees that we see that are old school, right? Yeah. That they're doing a job and they're doing it very well to the best of their ability. And then there's the new school, which really represents, I think, what most current CEOs are concerned about, which is, hey, Christina has a skill and she sits over in this department, but I can't grab her now to bring her over because she's tied up. Most organizations now are saying, no, Christina has a skill. It's highly valuable. We're going to allow her to pilot around, and wherever that skill is necessary at the time that it's necessary, we're going to use it. And so a lot of these organizations are getting a lot flatter. Some people are responding very well to that. Other people, you take away that hierarchy, and they're freaking out, right? And so I think culture is a big and will have a big impact on that portability of skills that exist in these large organizations where I need access to it right now. I don't have to go through Christina's boss or Christina's leadership. I can go into my system, see the skill that I need, pop it right in, and we're delivering value to the company like that.
Yeah. So important. So you did open up the higher education can of worms there, so we can we can talk about that. So we've talked about this in the past. So it's clear that many companies feel that what they're hiring, the talent they're hiring from higher education is super enthusiastic, very bright, but they have to invest many months right from the get-go in filling a skills gap. And that's fine, but there is a bit of a disconnect on a broad scale between what these big, many companies feel that they're able to acquire in talent and what they feel that where they feel they would like people to be before they're kind of onboarding them. So that's one issue that we want to think about. And then, of course, the other is this idea of you can have great content, but if it's not delivered in an intriguing or interesting way, then how do you make sure that people are retaining it? So, and that goes back to higher education. Like, what are the things that really help people learn? What are the environments? Because EdTech is great, but, when EdTech came on, everybody thought, oh, well, we don't need, 4-year colleges anymore. We can just do it online. Yeah. And of course, that doesn't work either. So now we're sort of in the middle. We're trying to figure out, okay, should I go to class? Should I do it online? Do I need internship? Do I need mentorship? So, what are you seeing about that in that area?
So, I will say that I don't have one disparaging mark about higher ed. I think the higher education institutions, I think, provide immense value and have continued to. And I found a little bullet that that I love to share for my friends and colleagues in higher ed. And the number one reason for Chinese investment in the United States of America, most people don't know, is real estate. That's the number one investment that they're making in America is real estate. And the reason for that is education. And that was a Forbes study that came out and said, do anybody realize what the number one reason is? And so our education system is still the best in the world, right? And so, but I think what's occurring and the challenges of this new fourth industrial revolution is that things are changing so fast, right? And so I've been in some conferences where academic institutions were really applauding themselves for the type of work that they're doing and the talent that they're developing. But in many cases, that content or that curricula doesn't necessarily take that last yard, if you will, of really ensuring that they're prepared to be doing what they're supposed to be doing in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And so organizations have to invest a little bit more, right? Whether it's 3 months or 18 months. But I think that's always been the case, mm-hmm. right? I think the challenge now is that those higher education institutions are trying to figure out, hey, how can we get only an inch off the end zone, if you will, rather than a full yard or 10 yards where you still have to invest. And so I think through this public-private partnership that we're starting to see, and I think more and more maybe towards like the 4th year or the 6th year or the 8th year, right? Maybe we'll have more of a transition that begins to occur mm-hmm. where we have a little bit of work share that goes on, or maybe the curriculum begins to modify a little bit. And I think we're seeing that in certain cases like cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. I think cyber is going to be one of those ones that is adopted not only in the higher education collegiate level, but I think we're also going to start pushing it down to K through 12. And so I think that bridge is going to start occurring certainly there, and I think it'll continue to expand from there.
Yeah, and I at this point, I really do have to give a huge shout out to my institution, University of Maryland, and in particular to a program that I'm very passionate about and teach in, which is the Quest Honors Program.
Yes, I read, you said that.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful model, a great example of really taking interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary talent and putting them together for 2 years, partnering them with industry. And really thinking about how to give them the space to learn the technical part, but apply it creatively, and really have to think about being leaders in this environment of thinking about this really challenging transition that they're going to make out from the higher education environment into the industry.
And where else or how else would they be able to develop that mindset if it wasn't for that program, right? They're not going to learn that in the college hallways, right? They're going to learn that through that real hands-on environment where they're having to apply those skills. Mm-hmm. And then you, as you suggested earlier, sort of get into this cultural conversation. Now we got to deal with diversity dynamics and leadership dynamics and retirement dynamics, and so there's so many different elements now that applying a skill is not a singular task, right? You got to apply a skill within a very diverse environment where there are political and organizational issues that you have to deal with. But I think the key that the more and more that we can train our young college level grads and undergrads coming into the workplace, if we can push them out into that community more and more, all the better for us. Yeah, and I loved it. Again, when I was looking at the report, the skills that it was mentioning are these really important skills like interdisciplinary, holistic, agile, multidisciplinary, flat hierarchies. That's just right. Curiosity, all the things that, we know that we want people to adopt as the first step of being lifelong learners. That's right. So that gives me good classroom ammunition, right? I can go and say, this is what we're doing. Take it. Yeah, and I also think that, there's some of these trends where employees, even the LinkedIn CEO, I think, said it a couple of years ago. He said, listen, I can't count on having staff anymore for 10, 15 years, right? I've got them for like 3 to 5 years and maybe not even that long, right? And so you think about that and like, what's my return on investment as a CEO or as an executive of an organization when I know that the portability of my employees are sort of a shelf life of 3 years? How can I ensure that I get value and benefit from hiring them and investing them as I am? But also, I think the challenge is, how do we ensure that we extend that a little bit, right? How do we create that environment here that they don't want to leave in a short amount of time? And how do we ensure that not only the environment is there that they want to be in, but also that we're providing the challenges and the opportunities long term? And then I think on the other side of that, if you think about employee dynamics, in many cases, a lot of these organizations are moving to contract-based staff, right? Almost like a project. Right. Hey, come in and help us with this project, and you're with us for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, whatever it might be, and then you're ported out. So I think there's a lot of different unique changes going on, and I think all for the good. But it certainly makes us all look at our skills that are relevant today because of this high demand environment that we're in.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about how you came to be interested in this higher education talent development space. What's your background and where how many careers have you had?
Right, right. So I have to say that I actually came into it by luck of a draw, if you will. But I originally I was going into the business of culinary when I was young. I actually got applied and was accepted to the Culinary Institute of America, a phenomenal school up in Poughkeepsie, New York. And then I had a sort of a brainstorm one day, and I said, God, being in a restaurant on Christmas and Thanksgiving and nights and weekends, I thought, So then I started pursuing a business career. And early on in my career, Christina and I worked for a lot of entrepreneurs. And those entrepreneurs were just incredibly strong mentors of mine. And just the value that they have provided me as a mentor and as a mentee of them, it just stuck with me. And so I was originally in sort of a project manager role, always in business development but serving on kind of major programs. And then a recruiter actually called me one day and said, "Hey, given your PM background, I want to bring you over to an organization that actually specializes in project management training." And that was my original introduction to it. But since then, the impact of technology on the workforce forced me into this space in IT. And I just think it's getting more and more exciting. I mean, if I had to retire right now, I would be like most and be, locking myself to the desk, because I think there's so many fascinating things going on right now that will both change the way that work gets done and will unhandcuff a lot of employees that want that flexibility and portability to be able to apply their skills and get recognized for that, and provide even more contribution than they can sort of in this bureaucratic environment that they might be in today. And these social platforms really allow for that expertise to shine. And if you have that expertise, you're going to be high in demand, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great place to be for our country.
Yeah, it really is. And, again, going back to this whole technology, ultimately the long-term value of this, it really is to keep America as a progress-oriented society, right? We
1,000%.
really do want to leverage technology to solve these important problems and to keep our young people and people of every age really involved in doing that, right?
And diversity, too.
And diversity.
I mean, we have the blessing of that, we're still an attractive island, right. To come to. Right. And I saw some of the students that were part of the Quest program and the amazing level of diversity that's there working together on these programs. I mean, we need intelligent, young, aspiring individuals early, mid, or at the tail end of their career leading this industrial revolution, because I think we're just cracking open the door on what we're really about to expose ourselves to.
Yeah, well, we're in complete agreement on that.
For good or for worse.
Good or worse. Well, Brian, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Anything else you'd like? Any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
The only thing that I would like to say is that there's some big things going on in government, and I would love to continue to see our elected officials find ways in which that we can create more seamless portability in and out of government. There is so much great talent in this world of ours, and so many incredible missions in our federal government. Between civilian missions, defense missions, intelligence missions. And the one thing that's preventing a lot of this rich talent to come in and serve our national interest is the hiring constraints that our government has imposed on itself. And I'd love to be able to see the portability of talent from those that are attracted to the private sector come in and do a 3-month stint, a 2-year stint, be able to pop right back out. If we can do that, our government's going to be even better than what it already is.
Such a great idea, and something I think we definitely want to strive for, that talent exchange and culture exchange and experience exchange.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you, Brian. It's been lovely talking to you. And
I'm honored.
Looking forward to our further collaboration.
Outstanding.
Take care.
Thanks, Christina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Employers and institutes of higher learning will have challenges trying to keep up with the pace of technology. A prepared workforce committed to lifelong learning is the only way to stay ahead of the curve. Thanks to Brian Green for talking with me today. Until next time, this is Christina Elson in the Ink Tank.
You can subscribe to the Ink Tank on Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit theinktank.org for a full transcript of this episode. A special thank you to the Kauffman Foundation for their support. From the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland, thank you for joining us in the Ink Tank.